Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Comrise presentation of resume writing tips to land the interview. We'll be starting our webinar in a few seconds, so thank you all for taking the time out of your day to listen to this. This will be the first in a series of webinars that Comrise will be doing over the next few months to help job seekers navigate today's job market. Okay, and we'll go ahead and get started now. So hi, to introduce myself, my name is Michael Ferrara. I am actually the recruiting manager at Comrise. I have been in the staffing industry for 15 years, and I've worked both in the staffing agency side and also in the corporate HR side in various roles related to recruiting and staffing. For some fun and completely relevant facts about myself, one time I played the game of Risk for over 12 hours with my friends, and somehow I've appeared on a Turkish television show, even though I've never been to Turkey and I'm not Turkish and have no connection to Turkey in any way. So it is true, though. It did happen somehow. So let's continue. Some tips for today's webinar. The line will be muted during the call, during the session, but if you should have any questions, please feel free to type them into the interface in the GoToWebinar system here, and at the end of the webinar, we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can. So to introduce Comrise, we are a staffing, consulting, and enhanced search technology company. We have been in the staffing industry for over 30 years, and we're headquartered in Hazlitt, New Jersey. We work with clients across lots of major industries like medical devices, pharmaceuticals, financial services, media, insurance, other areas, and we do serve clients across the entire United States. We also have a division that has developed technology which recruiters use to enhance their resume and candidate searches. So we have some kind of unique insights into how recruiters constantly search for resumes. So today we'll be covering a few different topics related to resume writing. One, we'll review the typical structure of a resume and what to put in and what to avoid when writing a resume, and how to really format it in the best possible way. Two, we'll also be talking about your resume and how to make sure that it will not trip you up or cause any problems when you're electronically submitting it or uploading it into different technological portals. We'll talk about your LinkedIn profile and some tips to help you out there. And then we'll cover some special situations that you may run into when writing a resume, including how to address gaps in your resume, what to do if you're a new job seeker, and how to handle someone who has a lot of short-term assignments on the resume. So here's a scary thought. The typical recruiter only looks at a resume for just 6 seconds before moving on to the next one. 6 seconds. That's really not a whole lot of time at all. And that means that if your resume is not concise and clearly written enough to really show a recruiter who you are as a professional and what skills you bring to the table in that short period of time, then odds are the recruiter's just going to pass you up and look at the next resume. And you really won't get a chance to interview for the job of your choice. And that kind of brings us to our main objective today. And that really is to stress the point that the purpose of a resume as a document is to get you to the interview stage. You write a resume to entice the person looking at it and to make them feel that, yes, you are the right kind of person for the job that I'm looking. You have the skills that are needed to solve the pain points that I have, and I'm intrigued enough that I want to talk to you and get you to the next step. That's why you write a resume. Now, that should also be said that you need to be honest when you write your resume, too, because anyone can write anything down on the resume, and if it's not backed by facts, when you get to the interview, then you're going to run into trouble because you won't be able to back up what's on the resume, or you'll fail a background check. So the key is to write a resume in an honest way that'll still get you to the interview. And if there's two main points that you walk away here from today, it's One, the resume, when you're writing your resume, you should always be focused on simplifying and highlighting your accomplishments in such a way that it'll capture someone's interest in a short period of time. And again, you really only have about 6 seconds. So in that 6-second window, you need to be able to catch the reviewer's attention. And two, the other key point we want to make is that there is no such thing as a perfect resume or a universal format that will work for everyone. All professionals are different. Everyone's worked in different jobs, has a different educational background, has done lots of different things, and everyone has different strengths and different weaknesses. And there's no one right way to write your resume, but what you can do is write your resume in such a way that it emphasizes the good things about you and the things that will make someone interested in hiring you and kind of minimizes or downplays the negative. So those are the two main points we want to talk about. And so now, while there is no universal right way to construct a resume, there are most certainly basic facts or quality control issues that every resume should avoid, regardless of who you are, how many years of experience you have. There are just some things that you have to avoid doing on your resume in order to succeed. So to give you some ideas, the number one is the length of your resume. Again, you only have 6 seconds to capture a recruiter's interest. And so the ideal thing is to try to find a way to get as much relevant information onto a single page so that when someone takes a quick look, they'll know that you're a good person and worth talking to. Now, with that being said, if you have a lot of work history and a lot of experience, I think at a certain point it is okay to go beyond the 1 page, and because you don't want to cut it down so short that you're not showing every good quality that you have. So if my advice is if you have more than 5 years of experience, it is okay to go on to 2 or 3 pages of resume, but you really should try to avoid going beyond that, because when a recruiter sees a resume that is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and believe me, we do see resumes that long sometimes. Honestly, nobody wants to sit there and read an 8 to 10 page document. It's just too long. No one's going to read it, and people start to question: is this person have poor communication skills? Maybe he or she can't summarize things effectively or efficiently. And again, you only have those 6 seconds. So if you have good stuff buried on page 8 of your resume, no one's going to get to it. It's just going to be lost. So the key is to get as much good quality information near the top of your resume so people see it and want to take you to the next step. 2, and this is really important, you need consistency on your resume. And while there's no right way to format it, there's no right way to write your job history, there's no right way to do anything, there's no right font size to use, none of it all depends, and it all depends on what you're trying to say and how you want to style it. There are, whatever you decide on doing, you need to be consistent with it. You need to have the same formatting throughout the whole resume. So if you choose to express your job history in date, in month and date format, do month and date format for all your jobs. Don't do month and date for one and then just a year for another. That's just kind of confusing, and it shows poor attention to detail. Same thing with the font that you choose to use. Don't use one font in one section and then switch to a totally different font in another section, or don't use different size fonts in different sections. All that stuff, it just creates the impression that you have no attention to detail, and it's a major turnoff when you're looking at a resume. Now also, when it comes to expressing your information, you want to make it as easy and clear for the reviewer to understand what you're doing in as short amount of time as possible. And from our experience, after looking at thousands of resumes, the best way to do that is to use bullet points. So when you get to a description of your job or a summary of your experience, putting that information in bulleted list format is much better than writing just a big block of text. Honestly, when you see something like that, your eyes kind of glaze over and no one's going to read a whole block. But when you have nice, simple, concise bullets, describing your experience, people do read that, and it's a lot more effective. So you should always use bullet points to describe your sections as much as possible. With the one caveat that if you're using bullet points, make sure that you either put a period at the end of every bullet or don't put any periods. But you'd be amazed how many resumes we get that have, half of the bullets with periods, half without. It's just that also kind of, it just looks weird. So just be consistent with that. And then lastly, this goes without saying, always make sure that you spell check your resume thoroughly and do a grammatical check as well. And I recommend you have somebody else review your resume too besides yourself, just to make sure you didn't miss anything. And again, I can tell you we looked at thousands and thousands of resumes at Comrise, and I can tell you probably half the resumes we get are failing in one or more of these areas. So if you could just do these 4 very simple things when you're writing your resume, you'll already be ahead of the game just by doing these basic things. So now we'll go to the meat of the resume, and we'll talk about the different sections of the resume and what to do and what not to do. So every resume starts off with contact information. This is the most basic thing on the resume. And you think it's simple, but there are places that you can get tripped up here. So number one, when you're writing your contact information, you should put your name down, obviously. And I recommend using your legal name, because if you use some other nickname or some other strange name, when time comes for a background check, who knows, it could cause some confusion or some problems. So your best bet is just putting your legal name. You need to put an email address always, and obviously put a professional one. I recommend sticking to some combination of your first and last name. Try to avoid putting like the year of your birth as a number, or just anything that can date you or give away information unnecessarily. I wouldn't do that. Just put your first and last name. Avoid silly or cutesy personal email addresses on your resume. Next, and this is critical, is your phone number. There's no point in sending on a resume if you have no way of a recruiter to actually get in touch with you, or if you make it really difficult for somebody to get in touch with you, then you're just kind of wasting your time by presenting your resume. Now, I strongly recommend you include your mobile number on the resume, because these days many recruiters actually send text messages when they're trying to get in touch with people. And if you put a home number, people may text it and not even realize that no one's getting that message if it's going to some kind of a landline phone. And in fact, you may not even want, it may be better just to list only the mobile number, so that that if someone's trying to call you, that's the number they're calling you on, and it minimizes the chances that you'll miss the call, or they'll call your landline while you're at work, and then you won't get the message until it's too late. And then lastly, you want to include where you're located, and I would say just stick to the city, state, and zip codes as much as possible. Don't put your street address. There's no reason not to do that. You'll just kind of open yourself up to stalkers or who knows what. So don't put your street address. I do have the caveat though, if you are not local to the area where you're applying, like if you live in a different state or you live across the country, I do think it is okay to, when you're writing your address, to put the city where the job is located, as long as you really intend to relocate to that area and you have some kind of accommodations in that area. It may not be your permanent home, but you have some place you can stay, and you're making a good faith effort to relocate to that area. I think it is, in that scenario, it is okay to put the city where the job is located, because if you don't do that, if you put an out-of-state location, I can promise you 9 times out of 10 recruiters are not going to look at your resume. They're going to see that you're out of state, they're going to delete it and move on. So your only chance is to do that. But please only do that if you really truly intend to relocate to that area and you have some plan for how you're going to do that. So you can see in our example here, Jane, while I appreciate her interest in Star Wars, it's not really appropriate to have that kind of an email address like that. So the way we have it here in the box, I mean, this is a much better way of presenting her contact information. So next, on your resume, most people will, old school resumes, you'd write an objective, and we strongly advise you not to write an objective. What happens when you write an objective, people tend to fill that with some sort of a cliche about how you're a hard worker, or you're, detail-oriented, and you want to be a team player. Like that, those types of fluffy statements mean nothing. Everyone sees it, and it really doesn't help you at all. And also, when you write an objective, people tend to focus on what you want from a job, what you want, how you want the job to help you. And while, yes, you need to look out for yourself as a job seeker, stand up for yourself, when again, you only have 6 seconds to get someone's interest, and that reviewer only really cares about what you're going to do for them in that moment. So to get to the next stage, you want to avoid anything that's going to distract from what you actually can contribute to the company. So we recommend instead that you write kind of a simple summary section. And in this summary section, you should use just a quick, bulleted list describing who you are as a professional, what kind of a professional you are, what your area of expertise is, what kind of job you're doing now, and describe what kind of job you're interested in doing. And then you want to list, specific skills or perhaps highlight a very significant accomplishment that you've had that's really going to get somebody's interest, and again, in a short amount of time. So think about your career, think about, what's the greatest project I've worked on, or the biggest accomplishment I've had, or something that's really going to help me get this particular type of job that I'm applying for, and make that a bullet as much as possible, and make it very clear who you are. Say what kind of job you're looking for, so that no one has to guess what kind of professional you are. Someone should look at it and immediately know that, yeah, this person's a program manager, or this person's a developer, or this person is, an HR specialist. Whatever it is, it's got to be obvious from a very quick glance. And also, some fields do require certifications as part of the field, almost as like table stakes. For example, if you're an accountant, you need a CPA a lot of times, or in a project management role, a lot of times you need a PMP certification. So if you're in that kind of a field where certification is a must-have, I do recommend putting that certification right at the top of your resume, right below the summary section. So again, someone at a quick glance can see immediately that, yeah, this person has that particular skill. Now next, it's pretty common on resumes to list out your skills. Most resumes have just kind of a grouping of just a list of the different types of things you worked on, the different skills. I do believe it is okay to have this here. It's kind of standard. If you don't have it, people will question like, well, why isn't that there? And they may have to do some guesswork. So I think there is value in listing out your skills because again, it kind of gives a reviewer a flavor of what you've worked on and what kind of professional you are. Again, but the caveat though, when you're listing your skills, you want to be honest about what you can and can't do. You can list every technology you've ever heard of on your resume, and maybe you'll even get an interview by doing that. But then when you go on the interview, it's very common practice for technical interviewers to pick random things on your resume and question you on it. Just kind of say, oh hey, I see you mentioned PHP. Tell me, what have you done with PHP? And if you can't speak to it, then you're going to cost yourself the job. So only put down what you've actually done or feel comfortable talking about on an interview. And then later on, when you're listing out your work history, make sure you mention those different skills in the body of the main part of your resume. So someone who's interested could see right away what you actually did with that technology. So now we get to I'd say the heart of the resume, and that's kind of listing out your work history. Now we recommend you use the title professional experience. I think that sounds better than saying work history or work experience. So I would recommend calling it professional experience. Please call it professional experience. And when you're writing these sections, I think just probably the number one piece of advice I can give you is to avoid using weak verbs or cliches. So when you're writing out, describing your accomplishments or what you did in different jobs, try to use strong action verbs. Avoid using words like involved in or assisted with or a cliche like, yeah, I was a team player and I helped my team out to achieve our goal. Those words make you look weak, honestly, a lot of times reviewers or recruiters or other managers who look at that, they see words like that and they feel like you're exaggerating what you've done or you're trying to hide something or you don't really have a lot of accomplishments yourself to speak of. Because, it just doesn't really help. So using words like developed or managed or created or performed or some really strong action verb, that shows that you're confident and that you've actually done what you said you did. It really helps. I'd also recommend that when you're actually listing out your working history, go with the standard reverse chronological format. That's probably the best way to do it. Sometimes people get cute with functional resumes or other ways of organizing your work history, and honestly, most people are comfortable looking at your work history in this style here. And if you do it a different way, you're going to cause confusion. It's going to take the reviewer more time to figure out what you actually did and who you are. And then they might think, well, gee, why did you format your resume this way? Are you trying to hide something? Like what's going on? And guess what? Your 6 seconds are up, and they'll move on to the next resume. It's not going to work. So the best thing that you can do is just kind of use a simple format and list your jobs in reverse chronological order. And as you're writing these bullets describing your stuff in each job, just as you did in the summary section, it's really important to describe your accomplishments on the project and what you actually did. And it's important to not spend a lot of time talking about what your company does and what your team did. Person hiring you, they're not hiring your company, they're not hiring your team, they're hiring you as an individual. They don't really care what your company does, they don't really care so much what your team did. They want to know what you did on the team and what, and can those skills transfer to the company that you're applying to. That's what they care about. So don't waste any time writing about those things, and talk instead about what you did and what you accomplished on that particular job in a very concise, clear, easy to understand way. And as much as possible, we recommend that you quantify your accomplishments. Sometimes, when people see a number, even if they don't really understand fully the context behind the number or if that's good or bad, just seeing a number there, for whatever reason, it adds a lot of credibility to what you're saying. It just makes it seem real. Sometimes if you just kind of use a vague statement without any quantifying factors in it, people may not read it, or they may think that maybe this, what does this really mean? Who cares? But when they see a number, they think, wow, yeah, that sounds really great. Maybe this person really is good or has the kind of experience I want. So we recommend using numbers as much as possible. And then lastly, just when you're writing out your work history, just don't be lazy. Like a lot of times, we see resumes where people who have been in the same type of a job, job after job, they kind of get lazy and they just sort of write one sort of description and they just literally copy and paste what they wrote from one job into the next job, or they use very similar wording or phrasing for each job, and it just, when you see that, it makes you question, did they really put any thought into this? Did they really do what they said they did? And it doesn't give a good impression. So take the time to write something unique for each section of your resume, and really try to describe each job in a different way. Lastly, when you get to the bottom of the resume, that's where we recommend putting your education section. Now, the caveat being, if you're an entry-level person, you don't have a lot of experience, then by all means put the education at the top of your resume, because that'll be your main selling point. But if you're a professional with any amount of experience, again, you only have 6 seconds to capture someone's interest. And the school you went to or the degree, yeah, in certain cases, maybe that'll help you. But in reality, most recruiters care first and foremost about where you worked most recently, what kind of a professional you are, what kind of job you're looking for. And the education doesn't always paint that picture. So to me, I'd rather have that at the bottom. It is important, but it's not what's going to get you to the interview. What's going to get you to the interview is your work history. That's the main thing people are going to look at, and your summary. So that stuff should be at the top. Education should be near the bottom. Again, unless you're a recent graduate, then it could be at the top. And certain details, like when you're writing out your educational experience, you don't need to go into a whole lot of detail if you're an experienced professional. The main thing you want to list is the school you went to, your degree level, and your major. That's really it. That's the stuff that matters. I would avoid, one, don't put the year you graduated. No one needs to know that, and you may end up unnecessarily dating yourself for no reason. Just avoid it. There's no reason to put it. And don't put your GPA. Again, it's not relevant. There's no correlation between GPA and job performance. So any company that's asking for that, it's not going to help. And again, the caveat for both of those things is if you are entry level and you want to highlight that, if all you have is your education, then yes, in those situations you could list your GPA, and you may even want to list the year you graduated to really show that you are entry level. Because if it's an entry level job, then they may not want somebody necessarily that's been out of school for 10 years. They may want someone that just graduated. And in that scenario, yes, then you do want to emphasize that you just graduated. But other than that situation, I would not recommend putting your date or your GPA on the resume. So you can see here, this is the resume that we've been working on, and I think, again, there's no right or wrong way to format the resume, but I think this is a pretty solid example of how a well put together resume should be. You've got a simple summary section. You see that she's certified in the right areas. There's a clear way to contact her. Her skills are kind of simple, and she speaks to those in the body of her resume. You can kind of quickly see what her accomplishments are, and they're quantified. And her education is there, but it's not the number one thing you're looking at. I think this is a solid example of a resume. So this brings me to the next part of our presentation, and that's related to resumes and technology. So these days, when you're applying for a job, 9 times out of 10, your resume is going into some kind of an electronic system. It could either be a job board, or an applicant tracking system, or some other place that you're submitting a resume to. And when you're submitting a resume electronically, there's 2 things you need to think about. One, most of these systems have some sort of a parsing tool that will scan through your resume and try to extract information out of it to input into their database. Or there could be some sort of an algorithm behind the scenes that is ranking you in some way or excluding or including resumes. So you need to think about those systems, and when you're writing a resume, try to think about ways to avoid getting caught up dealing with that. And then 2, you need to consider the fact that very often recruiters are going to actually be searching for your resume, and they may enter keywords or use certain techniques to find you. So you want to think, try to present your resume in such a way that it makes it easier for recruiters to find you as a professional. So some tips would be, one, to, especially in more technical areas where there's a lot of acronyms, try to include both the acronym and then maybe in parentheses spell out the, or actually list the technology fully and then in parentheses put the acronym, and then later on you can use the acronym. But it's a good idea to have both the acronym and the fully spelled out version of the technology on your resume because one, the algorithms that are scanning your resume or the recruiters who are running keyword searches, you don't know what they're looking for. They might have, for JavaScript, maybe they put JS or maybe they put the full JavaScript. And if you only did one of the two, you may miss out and your resume may not be found even though you had that skill. So you want to do both. Plus, it makes your resume more understandable if you describe what the acronyms mean for people that necessarily don't know what those technologies are. When you're describing your job title, you want to be careful here. Some companies, especially startups, they get kind of cutesy with their titles and they use things like coding ninja or cat herder or some kind of silly title to describe the positions in the company. When you're writing your job title, try to use a title that people understand that's sort of the industry accepted standard in your field. So instead of saying you're a coding ninja, just call yourself a software engineer. And this way, a lot of times recruiters, when they run searches, they'll do a job title search, and they're not going to search coding ninja, they're going to search software engineer. So you want to make sure your resume comes up in those types of searches. And again, you want to make sure someone who's not familiar with your company's naming system, that they can tell what you did very quickly by reading the title. And again, the caveat here being that if you do change the title, make sure that you do it in such a way that your company's HR department will verify that really was your job when they do a background check. Don't make up a title you didn't have or describe something that's totally out of left field that will make you fail a background check. So just be a little careful with that. Now, as I mentioned, there's different parsing tools in these systems, and sometimes if you use special characters on your resume, like an asterisk or a pound sign, they'll trip up those parsing tools, and your resume may not be properly entered into the database, and it may be passed over by algorithms, and you may not be ranked appropriately. So just as much as possible, don't use those special characters. Very simple. Same thing with fonts. Stick to the basic fonts, like the ones we show here. If you use a crazy font, or something that's out of the ordinary, the parsing tool or search engine may not necessarily interpret it correctly, and then you can run into trouble. And then lastly, you should use file types that are safe or kind of common. I think Word is the kind of accepted standard amongst resumes. If you use a Word formatted resume, you're not going to have a problem anywhere. PDFs are okay most of the time, but every now and then you may run into an issue uploading a PDF, or a system may not parse a PDF correctly. So I would recommend, when possible, use a Word document, unless you're specifically asked for a PDF, in which case then you should submit the PDF. Okay. So our next topic, LinkedIn. These days, when you apply for a job, 9 times out of 10, if there's interest in your resume, the recruiter or manager is going to go on LinkedIn and look you up. It's going to happen. So it's very important that what you've got on your resume matches what's on your LinkedIn profile. I mean, again, you'd be amazed how many resumes we get that look one way, and then when we look the person up on LinkedIn, their jobs are different, their titles are different. It's like, what, is this the same person? Like, what's going on? And that raises major red flags. That's a problem. So you want to make sure your dates of employment, your job titles on both your resume and your LinkedIn profile are the same, or match up closely, so that there's no red flags raised when someone's looking at the two. I also recommend that you seek out recommendations for your LinkedIn profile. Having those written recommendations on your profile really adds a lot of credibility to a profile. Whatever as a recruiter, if you're looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile and you see lots of written recommendations, it really helps. It makes you feel like this is a real person who really has made a difference out there. And I recommend that you request recommendations from your managers, your coworkers, if you're still in school, your professors, people like that, and try to get as many as you can on your profile. It definitely helps. And lastly, not just LinkedIn, but across all social media, you want to make sure you've got consistency across the board. You want to have someone looking you up on LinkedIn or Facebook or anywhere else. When they look at your profile, it should look like the same person everywhere. You want to have like almost like a brand for yourself that you're a certain type of professional. This is what you do, and that should be clear anywhere they look you up. So there's no inconsistencies. All right, so now we're going to talk about a few special or situations or challenging problems that you may face when you're writing your resume. And probably the most common one that people run into is how to deal with gaps in your resume. So A lot of times somebody, for whatever reason, they may be unemployed for a certain period of time, and as a result, there's a gap in your employment record. And it's not right necessarily, but a lot of times recruiters see those gaps, and it's a red flag for them. They may not call you, or they may not consider you fairly, and they may pass up on your resume if they see it. So I think while you can't always 100% mitigate that, I think there are certain things you can do to try to help. So number one, I think the best thing you can do is to write in, kind of write in the work experience section where the gap is. Just write in maybe a sentence or two, just kind of explaining what you were doing during that time. So you could say, during this time period, I was taking a training course in this, or I was pursuing this particular certification, or I went back to school and got a new to pursuing this particular type of degree, or I was volunteering for some other organization. Whatever it is, try to write some explanation. That's a lot better than just having nothing there. And then it raises all kinds of questions. Maybe you did work then and you're trying to hide the job, or who knows what. So having an explanation, it helps. And if you do find that you're unemployed, I strongly recommend you do something during that time period that you can write on your resume. And think of something. It could be anything. You can volunteer somewhere. You can take a training class. You need something that you can say you were doing during that time. And if you did it, then it makes it easier, because now you have something you can actually put on your resume to explain your situation. But I would try to avoid getting too personal with it. You don't want to delve too much into family issues or family problems, because again, it's wrong and it's illegal in many cases, but it still exists. There is bias out there, and even if it's unconscious, and if you start talking about your family life, you're just opening up the door to people acting on that bias, and you want to avoid that as much as you can. So you want to just really have a brief, simple explanation for what you did whenever possible. Oh yeah, and also another thing to point out, when you're writing your work history, we recommend using a month and date format to describe your years of experience, but if you unfortunately have a lot of gaps in your resume, you may want to just list out the year, or a year range on your resume, and doing that, it sort of doesn't make it as obvious that your resume has gaps in it, and it's something that can help. But again, the caveat being, if you do that, just do it consistently throughout your resume. It's weird if you have dates and months in one area, months and years in one area, and then just the year in other areas, then that raises red flags. Okay, another common problem is if you're new to the job market, what do you do in that situation? So if you are a newly graduated person and you're seeking your first job, in that scenario, as I said earlier, the best thing to do is to highlight your education instead of putting it towards the bottom, put it near the top. And you want to go into detail. You need to have some content on your resume. So if you don't have work history, at the very least, I'm sure you've worked on academic projects through your school. So you want to describe your project in as much detail as you can, and do it in the same format. List what you achieved on that particular project, so people understand that. And sometimes people even work on things outside of their school. It could be a personal hobby project or something that you did that's maybe related to your field, but wasn't a formal part of your schooling. That's great stuff too, is that people actually like that. It shows that you're passionate about your field. So if you've done that, by all means, describe it on your resume so people can see. And then obviously if you've done internships, you want to put those out there too, and present them the same way you would present a job. List where you did the internship, what your accomplishments were, and try to quantify it if possible. And then another issue is if, let's say you are a consultant, and Comrise is a consulting firm, so this happens. We see this a lot. We deal with consultants a lot. Oftentimes you're working on temporary consulting projects. You may only work in jobs for 6 months at a time. Then you may have another job in a different company 6 months later. And someone looking at a resume where you've got a lot of short-term projects, they may decide that you're a job hopper, and they may not want to talk to you, and they may pass on your resume. So there's some ways you can mitigate that. One, if you've done a lot of engagements, but they've all been under one consulting company, then you're set. You're in good shape in that scenario. All you have to do simply is list your consulting company and the year you started at your consulting company. And then underneath that company, you can just kind of mention the projects you worked on. And that shows, yeah, okay, maybe I worked at different clients, but it was all under one company. And that really mitigates the job hopping situation. If you work through all different kinds of companies, and then it's a little more challenging. But my advice to you in that situation is just to make it clear that you were a consultant. Maybe put the word consultant on the title, or list the staffing company that you work for. So this way, at least someone at the very least, when they look at the resume, they understand that you're a consultant, that you're not, it wasn't that you couldn't hold down a job and you got fired every 6 months. It's that, you're a consultant, you're a career consultant, and you've worked on different consulting jobs. You want to make it, again, you have 6 seconds. So in that time, you want to make it clear that you're a consultant and you've done consulting projects, and that's the kind of job you're seeking. All right, so now let's take this time to open it up to questions, and I see we do have a few questions, so I will answer some here. Some people had sent in some beforehand too, so let's look at some of these questions now. Okay, so someone asked, what are some overused words or phrases that you should avoid on a resume? I think you want to avoid anything that sounds like a cliche. So if you say, for example, that you're, detail-oriented and highly motivated and a team player, that anything like that means nothing and is a cliche, avoid that on your resume. Just don't put that in there. Everything that you write should be clear and concise and describe some accomplishment you've done or something that would actually make someone want to talk to you versus a vague, generic statement that means nothing. So I would avoid phrases like that. All right, let's see here. Now someone asks, what is an absolutely unbreakable rule for resume writing? I'd say an unbreakable rule for resume writing is don't make typos on your resume. I think that goes, for any resume, anywhere, for anyone, anytime in your career, if there's typos on your resume, if it's riddled with spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, you've lost. It really hurts. There are, believe me, I've seen it in the staffing world. There are definitely managers who will not reject the resume immediately if there's typos on it. So don't open yourself up to that. There's no reason to do it. Just, that's something you can control. There's so much you can't control in this world, but you can control typos. So don't make any typos on your resume. That to me is a cardinal rule for resume writing. Then somebody asked, do I need more than one version of my resume? That's a good question. And I think it does help to have different versions of your resume, but try not to be too different. You want to, when you're writing a resume, especially in the summary section, you should use that space to highlight accomplishments that really speak to that particular job. And if you're pursuing jobs in different areas, like let's say you're, a business analyst / project manager, it may be good to have one resume that is business analyst focused and one resume that is, project management focused. But where one highlights your accomplishments in one field and one in the other field, but that is honest too about both. I think in those situations it is worth the time to have slightly different versions. Okay. Somebody asked how long of an employment gap is considered a red flag for recruiters and hiring managers. That's a good question. I think anything more than a few months, I would say 6 months or more is probably considered a red flag. If it's a month or two here and there, it's okay. People understand, you lose jobs, it takes a little bit of time to get a new one. But if you start to get to the 6-month mark, and especially a year or more, that's when it becomes a problem. So that's when you should maybe take some extra steps to mitigate, your explain what you did during that time period. All right, and someone suggested if you're basically trying to change your career path, what's something that you can do to help with that? So if you're going from like banking to other finance branches. If you're in that situation where you're trying to change careers, then I think it's worth it to take some time and think about what's required for my new career. What are the skills that are needed in my new career? So you may want to look at job descriptions, for example, in that field, and kind of see what are the common requirements, like what are the things that typically are looked for in that particular area of finance or that particular type of job. And then after you do that, think about your own work history and try to think of examples where you've done something that shows that you've got skills that are either in that area or could easily be transferred to that area. So it requires some thought. You can't just blindly describe your jobs if it's in a totally different field. Because again, a recruiter in their 6 seconds, they're going to look at that resume and say, oh, this guy's not in the right field, next resume, and they'll move on. So that's not going to work. So you have to put in the effort to tailor your resume in such a way that, again, you're honest. You don't want to lie about what you've done. But you want to emphasize the stuff you've done that's related to that area. And you may even, in that scenario, even in your summary, you may want to say that you're a project management professional, but you're seeking opportunities in a different area, just to make it obvious that there is a change. And then from there, list your accomplishments or skills that are highly related to your new field, so people can see that, okay, maybe he or she didn't do this type of job before, but this is really pretty close to what I'm looking for, and this person may actually be a fit. That's the best thing I can do. And honestly, it's tough in that situation. Even if you do that, it's not always going to work. And this is a little bit outside the scope of the presentation, but in that situation, it really helps if you know somebody at the company or you have some sort of a in or a referral. That can help you too. They can kind of get you to get past that 6-second block that a lot of recruiters have. But the best you can do on your resume is try to tailor it as much as you can with what you've done. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, yeah. Okay, so there is one more question. If someone is between jobs and wants to work in a top company, is it better to focus on applying or preparing better to focus on applying or for taking consulting jobs? What is the minimum time that you should be on one assignment? That's a hard question for me to answer because it depends on your personal financial situation, I think. If you have the luxury where you can afford to take classes and get certifications and do what you need to do to pursue a new job, then you might be better off doing that and focusing 100% on achieving what you need to do to get the kind of job you really want. But not everyone has that luxury. Not everyone can afford to be out of the job market for 6 months. So if you need to get a consulting job to pay your bills and pay your rent, then by all means, do that. You have to take care of your family. You have to take care of yourself. So I would say do that. But at the same time, if you're in that situation, then you want to just maybe in your summary or something describe that you're highlight whatever certification you ultimately get that makes you qualified for your new type of job, and make it clear that you're seeking that sort of a permanent type of job or a job in the right area. I think that's probably the best thing you can do. Okay, and then someone asked, can I highlight or bold specific word or skill in my resume? That's a good question. It's interesting because at Comrise, for example, when we present our resumes to our clients, a lot of times we do that. We'll actually bold parts of the resume. So the answer is yes, you can do that, but I would be very careful about it, and you want only do that if you really understand the job and you really know what is important to the client. Because you're just a lot of times if you're just seeing a job description posted somewhere, you don't really know for sure what you're looking for. A lot of job descriptions are just long laundry lists of different requirements, and you don't know which ones really matter unless you've got an inside track or you're working with the recruiter. And so you may end up bolding the wrong things or things that aren't really relevant. And then in that 6 seconds, people they're going to look at the bolded stuff. And if the stuff you bolded isn't really what they care about, you've lost. So you might almost be better not bolding it unless you really understand what the key things are. If you really understand that, then yeah, it might it might be okay to bold certain things. But if you do bold it, bold the entire sentence. I hate seeing resumes with 1 or 2 random words bolded. That just looks sloppy and ugly, and I don't think it kind of takes away from the resume when I see that. That's my opinion. All right, then somebody asked, what city or cities to put in my resume when I worked from home remotely in one city for a company in another city? Again, that's yeah. So I think if I understand the question correctly, you're saying if you worked remotely, like if you're based in one city but a lot of your jobs are in remote locations, do you where or like if you lived in one place but the job was in another area and you work remotely, what city do you put there? Yeah, that's a good. I mean, yeah, I think again, you don't want to lie. So I mean, I think it might be okay to, one, you don't always have to put the city where the job is located. There's no rule saying you have to do that. So if all your work has been remote and you think that's going to be confusing to people, then you don't necessarily have to put the city. But if you do want to put the city, which I think in most cases it makes it more credible when you have it. So if you do put the city, you could put different cities, but you may want to just put somewhere that it was a remote position, so people understand that even though you're in this one city, it was remote. And there are cases where having that is a good thing. Like if you're applying for a job again, that's outside your state or you're relocating. If somebody sees on your resume that you have a history of working in different remote areas, it actually helps you. It adds credibility that this person's really going to move. Recruiters, they don't want to waste their time going through the process with a candidate who is not going to relocate. So if they see you've lived in one area your whole life and you're applying for a job out of state, like, is this person really going to move? But if they see you've worked in different places, then they'll feel more comfortable. Or if the job is a remote position and they see that you have a history of working remote, then that, by all means, do that, show that. Okay, next question. Somebody asked, what if you started your own startup now and you're looking for a job? How do you describe your accomplishments? I would approach that the same way you would any other job. Just list the company and say what you've done. I mean, if it was a complete and total failure and you have no accomplishments, I mean, I think even if you fail, you always learn from it. So I would just think very carefully about what you did, and even if your business wasn't successful, I'm sure you learned a lot. You learned how to set up a business. You learned the challenges. You learned whatever you have to do to succeed. You learned how to bring a product to market. You learned something. So just emphasize that part of it, and I would just describe it like a regular job. And if there's a gap in your resume after your startup failed or whatever, just write a little explanation for it. I think that should be fine. Okay, then somebody asks, once you get the interview, is it okay to bring a resume that is printed on 2 sides? There seems to be different opinions on this. My feeling is it doesn't matter that much. I don't think that's going to make or break you. I don't think it's worth thinking too much about it, honestly. I think either way is fine. I don't think any manager's not going to hire you because your resume was on 2 pages or flipped around. I don't think that matters very much. So, but again, you should try to keep your resume onto 1 page if you can. Just then you avoid the problem altogether. I guess if you do it on 2 pages, there's a chance someone might not flip the page over and see the back of it. So it might be better just to do 2. But again, I really don't think it's going to make a big difference for you. Okay, someone said I have a gap year due to health issue. What should I write? Yeah, I mean that's a tough situation to be in because you don't want to go into too much personal detail. You in that scenario, if you really were truly too ill to do anything, you couldn't do any training or volunteering, which happens unfortunately. You have to decide. I mean, you in that scenario where you've got nothing to say, you might be better off just having the gap there than writing that you had a health issue. Because again, if you do that, you're going to open people up to unconscious bias, and you want to avoid that. So if you have nothing at all to say, and I would really think maybe there is something you could say during that time period that's worthwhile. But I would generally, I think it's better not to point that out on your resume if possible. Okay, so I think those are all the questions. So we're going to open it up to a quick poll. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, we do plan to have a series of webinars on different topics on job searching this year, and we hope you found this one helpful. And we want to get an idea of what people would like to see as our next topic. So we just released the poll to you now. If you could take a second to just select which topics interest you, we would really appreciate your feedback. So we'll just give everyone a few seconds to respond. Give you 5 more seconds. Okay, I think we're good. All right. Well, hold on. A few more people are voting, so I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, I think we're good here. Thank you. Thank you very much for your feedback. We do appreciate that. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all very much for attending. We hope you derive some value from it. And by all means, if you want to learn more about Comrise, please visit us on our website. It's www.comrise.com, and you can actually view all of our job openings at comrise.com/jobportal. Please, if you're interested in a job with Comrise, you can certainly apply. If you want feedback on your resume or have additional questions, you can email us at webinars@comrise.com. So please do send an email to that address, and we can help you out. And if you yourself are looking to hire people, we'd be happy to help you, and you can email me directly at mferrara@comrise.com. So thank you all very much. And if you attended today, we will be sending you a recording of this presentation, so you can view it any time later. And that concludes it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.